Well, hello, welcome to the Orchard Podcast. We are in a series 3, episode, I was stuck on this bit, it must be four, five, let's go with 5. And the most important thing that I want to say is that we're not alone today. Most people will listen to this rather than, if you're watching this on YouTube, you will already know. But if you're listening to this, then I'm excited to tell you that we're joined by Danielle Strickland.
Yes, it's an honor to be on the podcast.
Oh, stop. It is. Stop. It is
an honor.
It's our honor. It is
Seriously,
our honor.
I was like, what do I have to do to get on this podcast?
We did.
I was like, it turns out I just have to come to Birmingham and preach 3 times on Sunday.
That was it. We were testing you.
Right.
You just about scraped through the assessment.
If it was on the 9:30 service, you'd be like, I don't know.
Oh, no.
Feeling a little bit embarrassed that we gave you a lift in the smelliest car in the world.
Yes, she's now Danielle's travelled in both of our cars, and I was relieved actually that
I won't give you on a grade. I won't say.
I know what the grade would be.
Amy's was officially dirtier than mine, it has to be said. But then Danielle said the dirtier your car is, the more free you are.
And the better I feel about my own condition, my own car.
So
it really is liberating. Yeah,
thank you.
It's a gift. It's a gift.
She did that deliberately, just like threw garbage
What will help
around.
Danielle feel better about her own life?
Yes, exactly. We're just here to bless you, that's it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this series is all about looking at women in the Old Testament, and we've called it, the whole series title is the Women of the Story. And we just loved it, absolutely loved exploring some of the amazing women actually that feature. And we said this before, that the women in the Old Testament and actually the New Testament, they don't get like loads of airtime in relation to the guys necessarily, but the significant role that they play in the overarching story and the way God uses them to sort of express His heart, His plans, His redemption work is amazing.
Catalysts, aren't they?
Absolutely. So we're going to be looking at Rahab. She appears in Joshua 2, so if you're not sort of running or driving or doing anything that might endanger you, then please do open your Bible to Joshua 2. And actually, Amy, it's your turn. My synopses, is that plural for synopsis, over the last 2 episodes have been fairly long actually.
I'm gonna
fairly
read
lengthy. So I'm going to have Amy, you can...
I'll read it all. Okay, are you ready? Buckled in?
Ready, buckled in.
Okay, so Joshua chapter 2. Then Joshua, son of Nun, secretly sent 2 spies from Shittim. Rachel wants to make a joke out of that.
She said, duty.
Go look over the land, he said, especially Jericho. So they went and entered the house of a prostitute named Rahab and stayed there. The king of Jericho was told, look, some of the Israelites have come here tonight to spy out the land. So the king of Jericho sent the message to Rahab, bring out the men who came to you and entered your house, because they have come to spy out the whole land. But the woman had taken the 2 men and hidden them. She said, yes, the men came to me, but I did not know where they had come from. At dusk, when it was time to close the city gate, they left. I don't know which way they went. Go after them quickly. You may catch up with them. But she had taken them up to the roof and hidden them under the stalks of flax. And she had laid out on the roof. So the men set out in pursuit of the spies on the road that leads to the fords of the Jordan. And as soon as the pursuers had gone out, the gate was shut. Before the spies lay down for the night, she went up on the roof and said to them, I know that the Lord has given this land to you, and that a great fear of you has fallen on us, so that all who live in this country are melting in fear because of you. We have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did at Sihon and Og, the 2 kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan, whom you completely destroyed. When we heard of it, our hearts sank, and everyone's courage failed because of you. For the Lord your God is God in heaven above and on the earth below. Now then, please swear to me by the Lord that you will show kindness to my family, because I have shown kindness to you. Give me a sure sign that you will spare the lives of my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and all who belong to them, and that you will save us from death. Our lives for your lives, the men assured her. If you don't tell what we do, if you don't tell what we are doing, we will treat you kindly and faithfully when the Lord gives us the land. So she let them down by a rope through the window, for the house she lived in was part of the city wall. She said to them, "Go to the hills so that the pursuers will not find you. Hide yourselves there for 3 days until they return, and then go on your way." Now the men had said to her, "This oath you made us swear will not be binding unless, when we enter the land, you have tied this scarlet cord in the window through which you let us down, and unless you have brought your father and mother and brothers and all your family into your house. If any of them go outside your house into the street, their blood will be on their own heads. We will not be responsible. As for those who are in the house with you, their blood will be on our head if a hand is laid on them. But if you tell what we are doing, we will be released from the oath you made us swear." "Agreed," she replied. "Let it be as you say." So she sent them away, and they departed, and she tied the scarlet cord in the window. When they left, they went into the hills and stayed there 3 days until the pursuers had searched all along the road and returned without finding them. Then the 2 men started back. They went down out of the hills, forded the river, and came to Joshua, son of Nun, and told him everything that had happened to them. They said to Joshua, "The Lord has surely given the whole land into our hands. All the people are melting in fear because of us." And then later on, we find out that basically they have kept their promise, and they do save them as they take on Jericho.
And her extended family.
And the extended family, brothers and sisters, and all of that.
Amazing.
Oh, that was good.
It's good. So we're going to sort of structure this conversation 3 parts, just to, again, if you're a planner, you want to know where we're going. The first thing we're going to explore the question, what does this tell us about the woman? So what's going on for this woman, the context, what we learn about her through this story, and then the next part is what do we learn about Jesus, who he is, etc., what he came to accomplish through this story. And then lastly, we're going to look at what do we learn, what do we take away for ourselves? What is it that we, as women in the 21st century, can take away from the story and apply to our own lives, apply to our own walk with Jesus? So that's our general direction of travel. So shall we kick off then? Danielle, we're like looking to you to bring the gold.
Well, I was actually thinking in the intro about just even women in the Old Testament, about how, like, it's not normal. Like, so in the era of when the Bible was written, it's a patriarchal culture. It is not normal to feature female heroines, and then unlikely, let alone like technically enemy female heroines, and then technically like excluded social outcast enemy the strategy of even just including and centering female characters is exceptional and intentional. It's not like, oh well, Rahab was so amazing that we have to feature her.
Yes.
It's an intentional decision that God has made, putting women in the center of the story.
And why? Why? What's your take on why God would do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think women are at the center of the story from the start. So you guys have already done Eve, but without women in the center of the story, we don't have a reflection of God. We have a distorted reflection of God. So counter to the dominant cultural norms, God just keeps inserting this female perspective, bravery, choice, power. And so I think for I was speaking on power at your church today, and one of the principles I've learned from actually Lisa Sharon Harper, who's an incredible theologian, biblicist, justice advocate. She wrote the book, The Very Good Gospel. And she says, always look in the text for where the power goes. So just in the story, where does the power go? And this is a great example of that. because the power goes to Rahab.
Yeah.
And you would, if you had to say one thing about Rahab's position, it would be powerless.
Yeah.
It would be powerless. Like, prostitution is not something you chose. It was something that chose you.
Yeah.
It was something that happened to you.
It's kind of a reflection of the outcome
Lack
of your
of
life.
choices.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. I would say probably today too. It's a reflection of your lack of choices, not actually your empowerment. It's a reflection of your disempowerment.
Which is why the whole, liberal feminist agenda around
this is a
work.
choice.
Yeah, this is liberation. Actually, in practice, this is not liberation.
Yeah, because if you had the choice to do anything else that would pay your bills, you would take it.
Yeah.
So I think the disempowerment of the character, and then literally, she has all the power in the story.
Yeah.
All of it.
Really cool. Yeah.
She has all the power. Like the Israelites their lives are now in her hands.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then even the soldiers that come from her people, she misdirects and sends in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
Right? And they're the ones that should have the power over her, and she actually has one over on them.
Yeah.
And that is such a phenomenally brave thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because, we can only imagine that if she was caught lying and then hiding these spies, that would be the death sentence, right? There's no two ways about it. So this isn't sort of a little lie that may get her into trouble. This is a whopper that could, that's a very British word, isn't
Whopper.
it? Whopper.
Whopper. I don't know. We have Burger King. We have Burger King.
Okay, sorry.
Do you know Burger King?
Oh, we do, yeah.
My mom went into a Burger King one time and ordered a Whopper.
I was embarrassed actually because the first time my children went into McDonald's, instead of ordering chicken nuggets, they asked for chicken goujons. I was so classy. Felt like, it's embarrassing.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Anyway, back.
Would you like some fruits with that?
Yes, exactly.
But it does seem like even the women that we've covered already, it has been that's such a helpful way to look at where's the power.
Yes.
But even
like Esther.
I know.
Sorry, yeah.
But even there doesn't seem to be. I know that she's asking for her life to be saved, but there is she's sort of not fearing death in some ways. Like there's a fearlessness, isn't there, with her? I don't know, that is really powerful.
Well, and she also it's not like she's responding; she's acting.
Yeah, right.
So I think that's what it's not like she's like, oh no, what am I going to do? I have to do something. She's actually acting on behalf of.
So good.
And then the response is really from the guys. The guys are responding.
Yes.
She's acting. She's proactive. She's taking the lead. She's, doing the thing. So it's very fascinating that a woman that would be considered the most powerless person in the social context is the most powerful person in the story.
Yeah.
Shocking. Only God does that.
Well, that's, again, even that, that clearly her choices are driven by some, internal void. What she has agency, right, in the story. She doesn't have to make those choices, and yet the choices that she makes play right into God's plan.
Yes.
So we can only assume that God is leading her in some way, and yet she's not of course she's not a Christian because Jesus hasn't arrived, but she's not
an Israelite.
She's not an Israelite. She's not her life is not oriented around God, and yet God is clearly at work through her choices. So even that sort of slightly blows my mind, that I think we have such a narrow view on who God might
be drawing.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, you wonder too, like, I've met a lot of women who don't have a lot left to lose.
Yeah, that's what
yes. Gosh, that's so true.
At the end of themselves.
Yeah, it's Janis Joplin, right? I think she sang "Freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose."
Oh wow.
And it's Janis Joplin or like Augustine. It's one or the other.
I always get those two, one of them.
But it's that that this isn't working out for me.
Yeah.
And then also, like, if you're looking for someone who has their pulse on what's happening and what people's real. So this is what's also interesting is that the king of their culture will be the last to know that the people are afraid.
Yeah.
Yes.
They'd be the last to know. So like
Yes.
the king's going to be told whatever the king needs to hear.
Yeah.
So again, it's kind of one of those. Again, it's this upside down power shift.
Yeah.
Because a king will never know. He'll be the last one to know the truth.
Yeah.
The first one to know the truth is the one with the least amount of power.
Yes.
But she knows that everyone's afraid.
Yeah.
And I would imagine that a lot of people that are frequenting her place are probably soldiers.
Yep. That's right.
So she's not just hearing it
Her ears on the ground, basically.
in general. She's hearing
Yeah.
it actually probably from the soldiers, from the
Yes.
cap, and they're terrified.
Yeah.
And that's interesting. So she's aware of the actual reality of what's really happening.
Yes.
Which
Even-
not everybody is, and especially
No.
people in power usually are the last ones to know. Like the revolution hits and you're like, what? Let them eat
Let
cake.
me count the
Right?
things.
Like, you're totally out of touch
Out of
with what's
touch.
really happening.
Yes,
Yeah.
but even that's interesting that the spies think that they're the ones that are afraid. So even that, I'm just thinking about sort of the spiritual dynamic for us that actually it's the enemy is afraid. Whereas the army of God are the ones going in thinking, we need to be afraid of them.
Yes.
But actually, little do they know that this big scary enemy is sitting in fear,
Yes.
waiting for them to arrive.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether that.
And why is the enemy afraid?
I don't know, Danielle. Why is the enemy afraid?
Well,
What's the answer, Amy?
It says what the answer is because
Okay.
they've heard.
That it's going to
Yeah,
be
they-
destroyed.
They've heard about the Exodus.
Yeah.
Yes.
They've heard.
Yeah,
so Pharaoh
yes,
would have been
yes.
Pharaoh would have been the greatest power known.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
if God can free
Yeah.
people from Pharaoh,
Yeah.
Yes, and part the sea.
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
how are they going to stand
Yeah.
against that God?
Yeah.
Right. So there's also that we forget at our own. It's not a new battle every time.
Yes.
So I think that's also there. Like we think this is like a brand new battle, and it's not actually. It's already been won,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right?
It's interesting though that why they don't surrender. Like why doesn't their fear lead to giving up as well? Because of what you're saying. Because Rahab had nothing else to lose.
That's right.
Yeah, and then there's I think there's an obvious pride,
yeah.
and then humility.
Yeah.
You know, I think there's probably something around that. Like it takes humility
Yeah.
to say, actually,
Yeah.
I think
You're
God.
bigger than we are.
Yeah.
Or
And
you've got God on your side, and we
It's
have
just such key lessons.
Yeah, to ask for help.
Uh,
Hey, if I, would you help us?
Yeah.
Would you save us when you do this? Which for me, one of the greatest lessons in this is that God wants to save.
Yeah, say a bit more about that. Again, this.
Because I think she's really wondering, and I think a lot of people are wondering, especially when when it's fear they hear. Like, would God save me? And then I think the good news, this is the full revelation that comes in the person of Jesus through Rahab.
Yeah.
Is he wants to save. He doesn't want to destroy. His intention, his heart, his desire is to save. And she keeps mentioning kindness, which actually triggered a memory for me of it's the kindness of the Lord that leads to repentance. And I was thinking, it is the kindness of God, and it's his intention. He is kind. He's not just like, I'll be kind this time because you were kind to me.
Yeah.
It's his character to be kind.
Yeah.
He wants to be kind. He wants to save.
Yeah.
He wants to rescue. So I love that she's trying to broker a deal, but the deal's an easy one for God to make.
Yeah. It's his heart. It's his
his
default
heart.
position.
Yeah.
Is to say.
If you're humble enough to accept it.
Well, that's the gateway, isn't it? That's the key. Is the humility to recognize I need saving, and maybe that.
How do
Well,
we
that is
live
what
at the
she
end
does.
of ourselves, basically?
Yeah.
Is the lesson, isn't it? Or how do we live with nothing else to lose?
Yes. Well, because also fear, we learn, through Rahab that they're melting in fear, and I guess fear drives you two ways, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Fear either drives you to surrender,
Towards.
or it drives you towards, I don't know, what's the, like, defense. Defense, self-sufficiency. And so maybe she's like one of the few people that actually allows that fear to drive her towards, I need saving, rather than, let's move
also
into a place of
this society, like I think this social structure is not working for her. So that's the other, and this is why I think the gospel is good news for the poor. So and we in the New Testament we see this where it's like, what does it mean for the rich? It's a different conversation, because what it actually is liberation for the wealthy too, but not in the way they want. So I think that idea too is like, this is good news to the poor, because this, even if they were to win and business carried on as usual in Jericho, it's of no use to her.
That's true.
So good.
It's of no use to her. So it's almost too, you have to get tired of this, whatever this game is. I don't like it. And I, even if it stays this way, I don't want to be part of it.
Because her work, and we've talked a little bit already about, her job, her occupation. There's no regulation. There's no protection for her. There's like, she is at the mercy really of the society that she's living in, I'm just.
What is prostitution is not the oldest profession; it's the oldest oppression.
Wow. I've not heard that.
That helps.
That absolutely.
It is something done against women. So again, whatever the culture, this is an oppression, not a profession. And which is why when we hear Rahab the prostitute, in the fight against sexual exploitation in general, we'll always say prostituted person. Because that's not the person's identity. It's something that's been done to.
And even the term sex work is uncomfortable, because it feels like it
justifies
something that, and we were talking earlier about this idea
which
of
I would say
consent.
sexual exploitation. I wouldn't call it work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's amazing that, well, it is amazing, but it's also not, because when you know the nature of God, of course that's where he's going to go. You know what I mean?
The other big thing I would say, and this is something that really amazes me about God in general, but God does not possess people. The devil does that. God does not possess people, the devil does that. What God does is give people choice. He did it from the very start. And to actually give a person their humanity is to give them the capacity to choose. And this happens here. So you have a woman who probably has not chosen what she does, has not chosen where she lives, has not chosen how she's treated, choosing. So now she's choosing.
That's the
God.
power, isn't it?
She's choosing to ask for help. She's choosing to save. She's choosing to. So again, now she's no longer this thing that something's happening to. She's the one happening. She's the one making the choices. And that's actually the good news. Is the liberation to then choose. Even if to choose is to say help. It's a choice. So it's also very like she's the hero. And because she's choosing. And that's what it means to be human.
I also think it's interesting that she, in her sort of bargaining conversation, she could have asked for money, she could have asked for status, but and she asks obviously for safety for herself, but she extends it to a fact like the thing that she asks is for her family to be saved. And I think that also tells us quite a lot about her character. It's funny, Amy and I, in the past, we find ourselves sort of almost like holding these women in the Old Testament almost too, like, we want them to be perfect. You know what I mean? Please. But of course they're not perfect, and yet I do think that says a lot about who she is. I might have just asked for money. That's what I'm thinking. If it was me, I'd just give me the cash or give me my ticket. But what she asks, it's actually bold, isn't it? It's kind of audacious. Like, don't just say to me, I want my, if you're going to say, I want my whole family with me, which is pretty amazing. I wonder what her motivation.
Well, it's actually probably part of her oppression in a sense, because the reason she's probably in that, which is the reason so many women are
Yeah.
that, is to create economic possibilities and stabilities for their
For
family.
her family. Yeah.
Whether it's like single moms or whether it's like families back home. You got
Yeah.
lots of trafficking victims, even to this day, when young girls sold into sexual servitude
Yeah.
to pay debts off that their family owes. So it's a really fascinating thing too, is that like this desire to even this oppression is most likely linked to her family's provision,
Yeah.
and so her freedom is also linked. Do you know what I mean? Like there's something
Yeah.
beautiful about the like upside down nature of turning oppression into liberation, right?
Yeah.
That's what God does.
And even thinking about our acts of faith and humility and obedience, what we pass down to the generation,
Yeah.
you know.
The impact it has.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
actually.
Because in her family lineage,
Yeah, exactly.
which I mean Jesus
Yeah.
Jesus uses her,
Yeah.
like Jesus uses nobody. Jesus elevates her status
Yeah.
as a means by which the Savior of the world entered.
It is crazy, isn't it?
Right? So think about that. If you were Rahab's cousin,
Yeah.
grandkid, nephew, I mean, we don't know.
Yeah.
But like my grandma
Yeah.
is the one that made the decision
Yeah.
that saved our family. And again, think about where she had no choices,
Yeah.
made a very brave choice, was honored for that
Yeah.
as a human being, given
Yeah.
dignity
I know.
and then kindness and salvation. And then from there comes all these other,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, wow,
I know.
that's incredible.
Yeah.
Till all the way, she makes it all the way to Hebrews.
Yeah. Hebrews 11.
She's
right.
named in the Hall of Faith.
Yeah. But even it's not clear, is it, how they didn't get told to go to Rahab's house, even, did they? Or to go to the, so even that, it's like this sort of divine, you know.
Unless they were going to Rahab's house for another reason.
Right, yeah.
Well, yeah,
Do you think that's
exactly.
the
I think it's
most
quite
likely?
possible.
Yeah. Even that though, that God would use,
Yeah.
you know, be in all of that.
Mhm.
Oh, it's amazing, isn't it? How gracious and merciful. So much more.
And how unshocked.
Which would be even more upside down.
Yes,
more
it would
upside
Because
actually.
these
Yeah,
guys would
right.
have come to use somebody
Yeah.
who's the lowest of the lowest
Oh,
of the low.
Yeah.
And then God would have said, actually,
Yeah.
I've got another idea.
here's some, like, let's
Yeah.
actually tell a
Turn
different
this
story
upside down.
Yeah, so
of a woman with agency
Yeah.
and faith
I know.
Well,
that
let's
can
see
save
that.
you
Yeah.
instead of use you
Yeah.
as
Yes.
well. Because she could have totally
Yeah.
given them over.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that would have actually potentially elevated her status amongst her people. I mean, that would have been a pretty clever thing to do, actually, but she doesn't
So
use that
who's the
opportunity.
redeemer in the story?
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing about the power conversation is like, even when we tell that story, we still think of Israel saving Rahab.
Yes. Yes.
But is that what happened?
I don't know what the answer is.
Rahab saved
Rahab saved Israel.
Yeah. Yes, of course.
Rahab saved Israel. And so it's really interesting even when we tell the story now. We're like, isn't that nice of those
Oh, how sweet
men
of
Yeah.
them.
to save Rahab?
Yeah.
Yes.
And completely.
And you're like, oh, the men that were probably there to
Yeah.
use Rahab,
Yeah.
who then were saved by Rahab.
Yes.
Right? And Israel now because they wouldn't have even known that the army they were facing were afraid. They
No.
might not have even
No.
gone without Rahab's intel. So it's even her intel, it's her saving, it's
Yeah.
her choosing, it's her bravery. She
Yeah.
uses all that to save them.
Yes.
And I don't even think they're worthy of being saved, probably, if that's what they were there to do.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's not, and so she's the redeemer in the
Yeah.
story.
Yeah.
And redemption has a flow,
Yeah.
just like oppression does. So oppression always leads to death. Redemption always restores and leads to life.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing is her choices to redeem lead to redemption
Yeah.
for her whole family, for her whole generation, for her whole,
Well, and for the
forever.
Forever.
Yeah.
And
For me.
yeah.
Thanks, Rahab.
Thank you.
Yeah.
In fact, why don't we jump? Maybe let's just explore a little bit further what this tells us about God, what this tells us about Jesus. Because I mean, the red cord, you know, is symbolic. It reminds us of the blood, you know, the blood of the lamb on the door frames of the
Exodus story.
The Exodus story, and God passes over those houses, and of course, it's the red blood that Jesus shed on the cross for our redemption, and so it's even that is pretty cool.
It's
like
thread, literally a thread.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're looking for a thread in the story, it's literally, what is that? If you're looking for a sign, it's right here.
It's a red cord, guys. It's almost like God's like, I'm going to make it really obvious.
That's right. That's right.
But that is the redemptive work, isn't it? That is only possible.
The foreshadow. Right?
Yeah, the foreshadowing of what Jesus does.
Yeah.
So maybe what else? What else do we learn?
The cord is not only a symbol, it's red and it's pointing backwards to the Exodus and pointing forwards to the cross, but it's also the way. It is the way out of the window. It's literally how they're getting out.
That's true.
And I think that's interesting too, because all theology is not just good ideas.
Yes.
It's a practice.
Yeah.
We actually have to.
That's so good. That's so good.
Yeah, we have to actually find the way and then take it.
Yeah, that's
not just like, okay, we're good. There's
this
a
is a nice idea. Yeah.
Right. We actually have to participate and use that way out.
Yeah.
So
and
what
I think
is
that's
that?
kind of neat.
What does that look? Maybe I'm jumping ahead into the next section, but I think we're okay.
Yeah.
What does that look like if somebody's listening and they recognize this need for redemption, whatever that might be?
Yeah.
What does it mean to actually grab hold of the red cord, as it were, rather than just sort of know it as an idea? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the first things is to know that you do have agency.
Yeah.
Because I think that's one of the things oppression does, is say you don't.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the root cause even of extreme poverty, when you think about what poverty actually is, we always think in terms of economics, but it's way, way worse than that. Poverty is not just that people don't have money. Poverty is disempowerment. It's that the choices they want to make, they can't.
Yes.
And so redemption, the very first signs of it, is this idea that maybe you do have a choice, that maybe you do have agency, that maybe you are a human, that maybe you could cry out, maybe you could ask for help, maybe you could move in a direction that is life-giving. I remember going to Haiti and talking to I had a kid that I was partnering with in a sponsorship program, Emerson, and it was nice to see him. He was like 5 or 6, having a good time. He couldn't care less who I am. But his mom, Jasmine, and I got to talk. And Jasmine told me about how she was like really just watching her kids starve to death, and had not I have no hope. I have no choices. She overheard a conversation at the market of these 2 women talking about a church that was letting kids into their school program that included a meal. And she said to herself, could it be true? And then she hitched a ride on a motorcycle. She walked for a day. She hitched a ride on another lift to get to the church, to knock on the door and say, is it true?
Wow.
And that's how her son got to be in my life. It was her pulling on a red thread.
Yeah.
It was her saying, I can either believe oppression and say there's nothing that can be done, or I can do everything possible to move in faith, to ask for help, to choose life for my kids. And I think, who's the heroine of the story? Me? Saving a latte a week?
Yeah.
Or Jasmine?
Yeah.
Putting a red thread up.
Yeah.
So I think for me, it's acting on the possibility that God is real.
Yeah.
And that He's kind.
Yeah. And He wants you.
And that He wants you free.
But even that concept of freedom, we get so warped, doesn't it? The fact that you've equated freedom with choice and agency. So often what we believe from the enemy and from the culture around us is that by choosing God, you're actually denying yourself choice.
Yeah.
or certain choices,
Yeah.
and therefore freedom. And that's one of the things that drives me the most crazy, actually.
So warped. Yeah.
It's so that we have so easy to swallow this lie about what freedom is. And you look around, culture around the world, we're all sort of feeding on this diet or this understanding of what freedom is, and it seems alien from what God prescribes freedom to be.
Yeah.
And yet that is the path, the freedom that Jesus offers is the path to life, and yet it gets so skewed and we're so easily.
Yeah, that's
So
his thing,
narrow.
isn't it?
Yeah.
I've set before you life or death, choose life.
Yeah.
So I do this thing called Brave Global, which is, we try to mobilize communities to reach girls before they're trafficked.
Right.
And we do this, it's a prevention strategy. It's an empowerment conference for girls, particularly girls who are in foster care or corrections, because that's the kind of bullseye of exploitation.
Yes, absolutely.
So I did this thing, my friend Tanis, who was trafficked, and she got out and we became friends, and she's an advocate and a global ambassador for Brave. Her and I used to do this shtick at Brave. So I would get up and I would have this paddle. I would tell this story about my friend who went whitewater rafting with me, and she forgot she had one of those little plastic jackets on. And there was this part where you jump in the water and you just swim really hard to the shore against the current so that you can climb up this cliff and jump back in the water. It's really fun.
It does actually sound a lot of fun.
It is fun.
Yeah.
But we did this and we all jumped in the water and we swam really hard. It was hard, but we were good swimmers. And we get to the shore and everybody's there but my friend Denise, because Denise forgot when she jumped in the water she had that jacket on. And so what happened was, as soon as she got in the water, her jacket filled with water.
Oh, wow.
And so she couldn't lift her arms to swim. So when we turned around, we just saw Denise going, help, floating in the water. And so this, she always tells this story, this really muscular kayak guide guy gets on and goes, I've got you. And she's like, oh, yes. So he comes and he kind of offers her a paddle. So I would take out the paddle and I would say, just hang on. And she said, I took all my strength just to grab the paddle. And then she said, and he dragged me into the shore.
Yeah.
And I would be that's choose life, choose life. So I would just be I set before you life or death, choose life.
Yeah.
And then Tanis would stand up in the crowd and she would go, if only it was that easy. And everyone would be what? And then she would come with another paddle. And she said, I was drowning. I couldn't lift my arms. And a guy came to rescue me, and he offered me help, and I took it.
Yeah.
But he didn't bring me to safety. He exploited me.
Wow.
He tricked me.
Yeah.
He,
Yeah.
And that's
So
the
good.
problem.
Yeah.
Is if it was clear.
Yeah.
So then everyone's oh no. So then we had to have a conversation about how can you tell if the help is life
actually
or if the help is death.
Yeah.
And so then we sort of had,
Yes.
then we have all this conversation about is it a secret?
Yeah.
Is it oppressive? Is it actually against your inner core? Is it, and we had sort of, is it attached to some sort of economic arrangement? It was just all these things. And then eventually, which is kind of when you are offered help by somebody and you can tell this is not life, what are you going to say?
Yeah.
So, and I think it's easy to say even in culture, people are thinking that just choice itself is freedom instead of choosing freedom is freedom.
That's it. Yeah.
But I would say that the culture, the general, the devil is an oppressor. So his desire is to trick you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that it does look like help.
Yeah.
It does look like an offer of
If
saving.
it was really obvious, we're not stupid, are we? You know what I mean? It
Yes.
has to be subtle.
Yeah, so that idea of, and this is where I think God is always working, is trying to say choose life, choose life, choose life, choose life. So I guess my prayer is that like Rahab, we would be people who would get somehow intuitively some revelation, some insight to go, I see life when it's offered. I see that this actually is freedom. And I can see this is not freedom.
Yeah.
And so for her, she sees the fear as oppressive
Yeah.
and the faith as freeing.
Yeah.
And she's right.
Yeah.
So I think for me, it's less about like, it's just more about like, don't be duped
Yeah.
by the oppressive spirit that disguises itself as help
Yeah.
when it's not.
Yeah.
And one of the great ways to tell, of course, is like, where does it lead?
Yeah.
Where does it lead?
Yeah. Because I know for me, and I've talked about this a couple of times on this, but there have been seasons in my life where I've had sort of an unhealthy relationship with food. And again, part of the culture that we live in, again, almost like, you know, the Bible talks about the flesh, the world, the devil, and how often those three things collude together to sort of embed this narrative, you know, in your mind, in your belief system. And for me, it was that sort of that freedom was found through being a certain size, you know, or a certain weight, etc.
Right.
And it was so enticing, you know, because those three forces would kind of collude together to reinforce this lie. And it was so, and I got to the point where I was able to recognize that actually the choices that I was having to make to sort of strive towards this lie, that if I was this size, this weight, then I would be free, I'd be happy, actually were a prison.
Right.
You know, that
it led to oppression.
It was exactly.
Right.
It was like I was in the prison.
Yeah.
And so
it looked like freedom.
Yeah, exactly.
But it actually led to oppression.
And everything around me is saying, this is what freedom looks like, this is what it tastes like, you will feel this, if you get to this point. And actually, it's only when you're there and you're like, oh no, actually what I feel like is in prison, oppressed. And then the next stage is then, okay, I'm coming out of the prison, but of course, the tempter, the enemy, he's going to want to lure all the time, lure me back, lure me back. And so then it's, okay, now I know I've got a choice.
Yes.
I'm going to choose the prison. I know what that smells like. I know what it feels like.
I know where it leads.
I know where it goes. Or I'm going to choose life. And I think
interesting.
I think for lots of people, maybe you get to that point and it's like, it then does become a choice. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and also the choosing of life makes it sound like ta-da.
Yeah, but
like for Rahab, even think about it. It's a cultural shift. It's a people shift.
Huge.
In many ways, she's betraying her people.
Yeah.
Like, so I bet you the stories about her on the other side aren't so great.
That's true.
You know, so there's a lot of things that she's having to do that are going to be new. And scary and hard.
That's
and
true.
Probably feel bad before it feels right.
Yeah, I mean, it's not Disney World, is it? When she's sort of at the end of the
worse
story.
Before it gets better. That's how freedom works.
Yes.
It gets worse if you ever detox anything ever.
Yes.
Coffee, heroin, it's all. It gets worse before it gets better.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fascinating.
Wow.
I have one more thing to say about freedom and choice.
Yes.
And I think it's if you're listening to this and you're younger, there's a thing Kierkegaard used to say called the illusion of choice. He used to teach this a lot. I think it's very helpful to the people I talk about. And basically, it's just, or the people I talk to. I don't talk about you. It's basically that there's an illusion that says that not making a choice is freedom. And that making a choice is not freedom.
Right.
So not making a choice is freedom. So the idea is that to choose is to say no to all the other choices. And so then you think, well, that's not free. And he used to use a little story. He said, like, he fell in love with a brunette and a blonde. And he said he loved them both. And he couldn't choose between them, so he decided to keep them both. And then that didn't work out, as you might imagine.
Yeah.
He lost them both. And he said all choices are like that. You have to choose to be free.
Yeah.
Freedom is not choosing.
Yeah.
That's actually nothing.
Yeah.
It's been like not having two masters.
I was just thinking that.
Yeah, and also, but it's also nothing. You get nothing.
Yeah.
So you don't choose to be free, and your freedom's nothing.
Yeah.
And so he said in his generation, and I think it's true of this generation, who's exhausted by the choices.
Yeah.
So, and then also duped into believing that making a choice is actually is slavery, when really not making a choice is a kind of form of slavery. So I think it's that too. So Rahab easily could have been like, I'm on no one's side.
Yeah.
I won't make any choices, and it would have led to destruction.
Yeah.
But she made a choice, and the choice was to freedom, and I think that's what God wants us to do.
Yeah.
Choose love.
And it was a step of faith, because she had no idea that the choice that she was going to make would pay off ultimately. So that's the faith thing, isn't it? It's like this is always a step of faith.
Even the most powerful demonstrations of God's might are matched, even in the Old Testament, by God's inclusive kindness.
Yeah.
That's the other thing.
Yes,
So
because
she had heard about this mighty God.
Yes.
And this mighty God, his might is matched by his desire to include Rahab and save her family.
Yes. Because it would be easy to miss that with the Old Testament sometimes, wouldn't it?
100%.
But it's there. It is there the whole time. Well,
Fun times.
Will you pray over us? Even as we're speaking, like even someone who might be listening, who might be in that moment of whether to speak up or not. I just wonder whether you would pray over us, pray over whoever might be listening to, for courage in that sense.
Yeah, so God, we thank you so much that you are and always have been at work, literally threading redemption in all of our stories. And I pray right now that you would give everybody who's listening to this and us who are in this room the revelation, the insight to see the choices that we have, the kindness, the redemption, the opportunities, the agency that you've given us to choose life. I pray that they would appear at our door, that they would wake us up in the night, that there would be an inclination of our hearts. I pray for everyone who's been told their whole life that they can't. And I pray right now that your Spirit would help them know that they can. They can. And I also pray for everyone who's heard that you're angry and you're destructive and you're judgmental. I pray that we would all be surprised at just how kind and inclusive and redemptive you are. And that that's your plan for everyone. So I pray, God, for every potential Rahab out there who feels completely disempowered, that they would know that you are with them, that you love them, that you call them, that they can choose. And when they choose, you meet them there in full salvation and redemption. And keep helping us, put as many red threads in as many windows as we possibly can with our lives and our witness and the courage of our own decisions. In Jesus' name.
Amen. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah. Maybe we should just do that every time. Do you want to just
just fly over.
Just come over.
A quick flight over across the pond.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening, and I hope this encourages you.